Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Being an FBI agent wasn't my first career choice. Initially, I pursued a career in law, wanting to fight discrimination through the legal system. But after witnessing how some cases got buried in bureaucracy, I realized I needed to be on the front lines. That's how I ended up joining the Federal Bureau of Investigation 10 years ago. My specialty became civil rights violations and hate crimes, though I handled various other cases too. The job was demanding, but knowing I was making a real difference made it worth it. It was during my day off when the incident happened. The air conditioning in my apartment had broken down, and despite the scorching summer heat, I still had to wear my suit for a meeting later that afternoon. I decided to grab some groceries before heading to the office. The local supermarket was relatively quiet for a weekday morning. I was in the produce section, examining some tomatoes when I heard it. A shrill voice behind me demanded to know what I thought I was doing there. I turned around to face a middle-aged woman with bleached blonde hair and makeup that looked like it had been applied with a trowel. When I simply replied that I was shopping like everyone else, she nastily declared that she didn't want me there and refused to shop in a store that served people like me. The implications in her words were crystal clear. I dealt with people like her throughout my career, people who judged others based solely on their skin color. Usually, I would have just walked away, but something about her entitled attitude struck a nerve. I suggested that she continue with her shopping and leave me alone. This only enraged her further. She started yelling about how she'd been shopping there for 15 years, knew the owner, and would have me thrown out. She was getting louder, drawing attention from other shoppers. A young store employee approached cautiously and asked if everything was okay. Karen immediately started lying, claiming that I was harassing her and demanding that I be removed from the store. I explained that I was simply trying to shop in peace and that she was the one causing a disturbance. She responded by calling me a liar and making a racist comment about how my people were always playing the victim. The store employee looked uncomfortable, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. Other customers were watching now, some recording with their phones. Karen then threatened to call the police, claiming I was threatening her. I warned her against making false reports, but that was when she snapped. She lunged forward, her manicured nails aimed at my face. Years of training kicked in automatically. I sidestepped her attack, grabbed her wrist, and in one smooth motion, had her pinned against the floor, her arms behind her back. When she screamed for help, claiming she was being attacked, I announced my position as a Federal Bureau of Investigation agent and told her she was under arrest for assaulting a federal agent. Her makeup-caked jaw dropped as reality finally sank in. She tried to deny it, claiming I was lying. I pulled out my badge while maintaining my hold on her. The store employee had already called the local police, who arrived within minutes. When they led her away in handcuffs, she was still screaming about who she was and how her husband was a lawyer, insisting they couldn't do this to her. One of the officers told her that assaulting a federal agent was a serious offense and she was looking at significant jail time. Later that week, I attended her bail hearing. Turns out this wasn't her first offense. The district attorney had compiled an impressive collection of other incidents, harassment complaints, racist outbursts, and even a previous assault charge that had been settled out of court. Her husband, the supposedly powerful lawyer she'd bragged about, turned out to be a small-time real estate attorney who looked utterly mortified as the charges were read out. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, was not impressed by Karen's tearful performance. The judge denied her bail. She ordered Karen to remain in custody until her trial. Karen tried to protest, whining about having a charity function the following week, but the judge simply called for the next case. When they led her away, I caught her eye. Gone was the entitled, superior attitude. Instead, I saw something I'd seen many times in my career. The look of someone finally facing what's coming to them. So, I've been working as a security guard for a private company, doing the graveyard shift at 2 hotels. It's not the most exciting job, but I take pride in being respectful and professional even when dealing with difficult people. My shift starts at 9 p.m., which is when both hotels close their lobbies to the public. I always make it a point to check in with the front desk staff at both hotels when I start my shift, as they're usually the first ones to notice if something's wrong. On this night, I was doing my usual rounds when the front desk clerk at the second hotel asked me to handle a group of adults who'd been drinking and getting rowdy in the lobby. When I approached them, I kept my cool and politely explained that, while the lobby was now closed, they were welcome to continue their gathering in their rooms. The group immediately started complaining, insisting that, as paying guests, they had every right to stay in the lobby. I could smell alcohol on their breath as they argued, and their faces were flushed from drinking. Despite their protests, they eventually moved to their rooms, grumbling the whole way about how the hotel was ruining their fun. About 30 minutes later, I got another call about children running in the halls. The hotel was hosting a sports event, so there were lots of kids around, but these complaints were about two twins who'd been causing trouble all day. While investigating, I discovered that these kids had been vandalizing the hotel. They'd broken fire extinguisher cases on multiple floors, denting one and completely destroying another. The maintenance staff showed me how the twins had been systematically going through each floor, damaging property as they went. When they saw me, they ran back to their room. After documenting the damage with photos on my phone and getting statements from witnesses, I reported everything to the front desk clerk, who immediately called the manager. The manager ordered their immediate eviction and approved charging them for the damages. When I went to their room at 10:30 p.m., only the kids were there. I introduced myself as hotel security and asked if their parents were in the room. When the kids said no, I asked where their parents were, and they told me they were in another room. After getting the room number, I asked them to contact their parents. I stayed nearby to make sure they didn't cause more damage, and I called for the front desk clerk to join me as a witness. I could hear the kids inside the room making phone calls and moving around, but they weren't causing any more trouble at least. 15 minutes later, the parents finally showed up and they were furious. The entitled father immediately accused me of creeping outside their children's room. I tried explaining that I was a security officer and that their children had been accused of breaking hotel property, but their friend jumped in, suggesting I was harassing young boys. The mother stood behind them, nodding along and occasionally adding her own accusations. The situation escalated quickly, with the parents denying everything despite multiple witnesses. Then the entitled father tried to pull rank, declaring that he worked for the Federal Bureau of Investigation and didn't have to follow my instructions to leave. His face turned red as I demanded to see his federal credentials as required by state law. He stammered for a moment before claiming he'd left them in his room and never produced them. When they refused to leave, I called the local sheriff's department. The entitled father then went to the front desk, demanding a refund and intimidating the staff by continuing to claim he was a federal agent. I could see the fear in the young clerk's eyes as this man towered over the desk, making threats and demands. The night auditor, who had just started his shift, tried to calm the situation but was clearly uncomfortable. The sheriff's deputies arrived around 3 a.m. and I explained everything, including my concerns about the father potentially having an undeclared weapon on property. The entitled father then changed his story, claiming we never spoke to them about any issues. His friend backed him up, but their stories didn't quite match. He and his friend started demanding personal information about all the staff involved, writing down badge numbers and names of the deputies present. Though they stayed that night because the night auditor felt bad about kicking out children at 4 a.m., the hotel made sure they paid for their actions. Since they were part of a sports group booking, the hotel charged every room in their group over $500 for the damages, attaching detailed reports from both the hotel staff and myself explaining why. The sports team organizers were furious when they found out what happened, and I later heard that the family was banned from participating in future team events. Not only did the entitled father's fake Federal Bureau of Investigation credentials never materialize, but one of the responding deputies turned out to be an old friend from high school I hadn't seen in a decade. We had a good laugh about the whole situation after everything calmed down, and he told me this wasn't the first time someone had tried to pretend they were a federal agent to get out of trouble. The hotel added the family to their do not rent list, ensuring they wouldn't be able to cause problems at any of the chain's locations in the future. Let me tell you about how my first real job turned into a battlefield with the most entitled coworker I've ever met. Right after high school, I landed a data entry position at a large company, and I treated it like it was my dream job. While others came and went, I stayed put and worked my way up. Within 2 years, I became one of 2 supervisors in our department. My fellow supervisor and I were a dream team. We created training programs, wrote department policies, and managed all the staff effectively. Life was good until my fellow supervisor went on maternity leave and our manager got recruited to another department. The company brought in a new manager who was super nice, but completely lost when it came to our operations. I stepped up to help him understand everything while also helping find a temporary replacement for my fellow supervisor on leave. When the department head asked me to recommend someone to fill in during my colleague's absence, I suggested the new hire from accounting. I told them he seemed capable and eager to learn. And that's how this entitled guy became our acting supervisor. Let's call him the Snake because that's exactly what he turned out to be. At first, everything seemed fine. I was basically running the department, conducting interviews, training new staff, attending all the management meetings, and keeping everything flowing smoothly. Then one day, my manager pulled me aside. He confided that he was thinking about leaving the company, but before he did, he wanted to recommend me for his position. He praised my work and said I'd been doing an amazing job. I was thrilled. It felt like all my hard work was finally paying off. But a week later, my manager delivered the bad news. He explained that while he had spoken to the director about me taking over, they were giving the position to the Snake instead. When I asked why, he revealed that the Snake had been spending a lot of time with the director, going on golf outings and getting drinks after work. While I was actually doing the work, the Snake had been playing politics. He'd spend hours in the director's office telling jokes and arranging social outings instead of managing his team. I was disappointed but decided to keep doing my job professionally. Then came the Excel project disaster. We had a crucial payroll-related project that needed thousands of entries. I distributed the work among all staff members, including the Snake's team. At the end of the day, I only received submissions from my direct reports. I approached one of the Snake's team members. When I asked about the Excel project I'd sent earlier, she nervously admitted that the Snake had told them not to do it. She explained that he had instructed them to ignore any assignments from me, claiming I wasn't their boss. Instead of confronting him, I decided to let him dig his own grave. The next morning, the director called an emergency meeting with all supervisors and our manager. When asked why the payroll project wasn't completed yesterday, I explained that I had distributed the work as usual and completed my portion, offering to show the submissions I had received. The Snake turned white as a sheet. He stammered and tried to explain his actions, but the director wasn't having it. We were all dismissed except for the Snake. Through the glass walls, we could see the director gesturing wildly while the Snake slumped further and further into his chair. We could hear the director shouting about how unacceptable it was and how the entire payroll department was backed up because of this. A week later, my fellow supervisor returned from maternity leave. The Snake was demoted back to his previous position, but the story doesn't end there. The director called me into his office and told me they had been watching how I handled everything these past few months. He offered me the position of manager, which I happily accepted. The Snake tried to file a complaint about unfair treatment, but HR had a field day when they reviewed his conduct. During his brief time as acting supervisor, they discovered he'd been falsifying his timesheets during all those business meetings at the golf course. He was transferred to the company's smallest branch office in the middle of nowhere. I still see him sometimes at company-wide virtual meetings. He always disconnects when it's my turn to present department updates. Life in a small town during the 90s wasn't always easy, especially for a kid who preferred martial arts over football. I started karate classes at 12 after being pushed around at school one too many times. My parents were supportive but worried. They'd heard stories about aggressive dojos and strict instructors. Still, I was determined. After researching a few places, we found a dojo with a reputation for being tough but fair. The instructor, who we all called Chief, was exactly what you'd expect from an old-school karate master. He wasn't unnecessarily cruel, but he didn't believe in coddling his students either. His philosophy was simple: you earn what you get, and losing is just as important as winning because it teaches you where you need to improve. I trained there for 2 years, working my way up through the belts. Each promotion was hard-earned. You had to demonstrate your kata, a series of choreographed movements, and win a sparring match against another student testing for the same belt. We wore full protective gear during sparring: headgear, mouth guards, chest protectors, the works. It wasn't about hurting each other, it was about technique and strategy. One Saturday morning, I was testing for my brown belt. The dojo was packed with parents and students. My opponent was this really nice kid who'd been training about as long as I had. We were pretty evenly matched, but I'd spent extra time practicing my defensive techniques, and it showed during the match. Chief called for us to begin. The match started and I managed to score several clean hits while maintaining a solid defense. My opponent was good, but he kept dropping his guard on his left side. After about 3 minutes, I was ahead by 8 points. Chief announced the match point and declared me the winner. My opponent and I bowed to each other, and he graciously congratulated me on my victory, admitting that he needed to work on keeping his guard up. That's when everything changed. His father stormed onto the mat. He started yelling about how unfair the situation was, mentioning how much money he paid for the classes and insisting that his son deserved something too. He claimed his son had gotten beat up, which wasn't true at all. Chief asked him to step off the mat, explaining that this was how things were done at the dojo and that his son had fought well but lost fairly. This only seemed to make the father angrier. The opponent tried to stop his father, telling him that he wasn't beat up and had lost because of his own mistakes. He even mentioned that this kind of behavior was why he lived with his mom instead. But his father wouldn't listen. Chief, wearing an unsettling grin, responded to the father's demands for recognition by agreeing to give out ribbons using his signature phrase, "Okie dokie artichoke." He disappeared into his office while the father stood there looking smug. The rest of us just watched in awkward silence. A minute later, Chief emerged with 2 pieces of red ribbon. He walked over to my opponent and tucked one into his belt, announcing it as his participation ribbon. The ribbon had "loser" written on it in black marker. Before the father could react, Chief turned to him with an even bigger piece of ribbon, suggesting they should match as father and son. The father stood there speechless, opening and closing his mouth like a goldfish. Finally, he snatched the ribbon and stormed out of the dojo, leaving his son behind. My opponent showed up to every single class after that, wearing his "loser" ribbon proudly. He trained harder than ever, and 2 months later, he won his brown belt test. When Chief handed him his new belt, he also gave him a new ribbon that said "winner." The old "loser" ribbon was framed and hung on the dojo wall as a reminder that losing is just part of the journey to winning. We never saw him at the dojo again. Apparently, he started sending his ex-wife to watch the classes instead. I heard that she found the whole situation hilarious and had the "loser" ribbon framed. It now hangs in their living room as a reminder to her ex-husband about the day he got schooled by a karate instructor. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.